This is one of my favorite shifts ever, and I've been thinking for a long time I want more of it. So I'm going to be making a new one, and I figure I'll take you along for the ride because people have been requesting like sewing tutorials and tips for beginner-friendly patterns. This is going to be a multiple part series, so this is an introduction and we're also going to draft the pattern. I'll be using the exact same measurements as I did for this one. So what we're working with is two big rectangles that will make out the body. And I've measured from my shoulder to how long I want it to be, which is 95 centimeters, including seam allowance. And then the width is half of my bust, and I've added 10, 12 centimeters. So I end up on 62. You can add more if you want a roomier one. Then we have the sleeves, which are also rectangles, and they're going to be rolled up into a tube. We also have these little gussets, and they are added so that you have the sleeve going like this, and they have the small little gusset here. And we also have these scores that are triangles, and they're going to be added to the sides here to make extra room at the bottom. And I'm cutting out a rectangle that's 40 times 65 centimeters, and I'm just cutting it in half. And afterwards I'm going to have to round off the corners a bit because this side is shorter than this and they need to be the same, so we're going to round them off. So that's where we're starting. My fabric is 138 wide, 95 and 62 here, which would leave me with the 40 65 piece, and then I can cut the sleeves from basically here then, and I'll fit in the small gussets wherever I have extra fabric. But the more common way of doing this is to just lay the fabric out flat on the floor, measure it out with chalk, cutting along those lines. But I prefer to do the drawn thread thing. First step is making sure I have a straight edge. So I'm going to pull a thread close to the edge. You don't have to do this. This is for nitpicky people. And I'm going to pull at it. What happens is you get a very, very straight line that you can cut along. And then we're going to use the same method to make sure we get super straight pieces. It's so satisfying. Now that I have a nice clean edge, I'm just going to take my measuring tape. So this is the edge that I'm working with. That means I'm going to measure 95 centimeters from here to here. And then I'm going to do the same thing as I just did. I'm going to pick a thread and then just draw it to mark a new line. I'm just going to draw the thread until that point, and I'm going to draw another thread here and here. It is absolutely perfectly fine to not want to do it this way. But what I do like about it is that I can do it from the couch because I don't have to lay the fabric out. So now we're going to start pinning it together, and we're going to take the sleeve, we're going to take one of the gussets, just pin it like so. And we're going to fold it double. Now we're going to pin this side of the gusset to the other end of the sleeve. Now it looks like this. And we're going to pin all of this together as well. So I'm going to fold it double like so, because that way I can see where the shorter side ends, and I can curve this out so the bottom is even. Then we're going to attach that cord to the side of the bodice. We're going to take both bodice pieces and pin them together at the top, which will be the shoulders. And I haven't yet measured out how big I want the neckline. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stitch the shoulder seam a bit longer than it needs to, and then later I'll just cut away the excess. Now we have the core to one side of the bodice, so I'm just going to stitch it in place to the other side. Just trust the process, okay? So this is the bodice part. I've got my two shoulder seams, and I've got my gore here that's attached to both the front and the back, and then the sleeve is gonna come on like this. This is so hard to film in a good way. Now I want to say I pinned this together to show what it's supposed to look like, but it's a lot easier to just pin one seam, stitch that one, pin the next one, stitch that one. The first thing we're going to do is a straight seam, and you can do it in two ways. You can either use a sewing machine or you can do it by hand. This is the only seam in this project that I actually do on a sewing machine, because for some reason I don't like hand stitching straight seams, but I'm going to show you how to do that in case you want to. I'm going to stitch a line 1.5 centimeters from the edge, 5/4 inch in American or something. I pity you Imperials. Here you can either do a bunch of back stitches, or you can just knot it off, which is what I usually do. And I advise doing either combination stitch, so up and down a few times, and then going back a little bit and doing the same up and down, or to just do back stitches completely, which is going back half a stitch, going forward a full stitch, and same back a little bit, forward. The second one takes a lot longer, but it's a lot stronger. So this is how you hand stitch it together. Once you have all of those seams together, it's going to look like this. So you have the seam allowance on the inside, and this one will fray. You'll see threads will come loose. So you need to finish this raw edge on the inside, and you can do that on a machine by doing a zigzag, or you can do it by hand. I'm going to show you how to do that. Now, the beauty, trying to film with kittens. Now, what I really love about felling seams is that the inside will look like this, very neat and tidy. This is one of my seams on the side of the gore. I'm going to take one seam allowance and I'm going to cut it in half. When it comes to the gores and the gussets, I like felling the seams inwards. So we'll just be cutting it in half like this. And when we've done that, we're going to fold under layer over the shortened layer, like so. And then we're going to fold it once more. Up here at the top, I've trimmed both sides. I'm going to fold it in, take the other half, just fold it, and then we get a top that's very smooth and fine. I've pinned the fabric down to my dress so that it stays in place when I pull at it. And this way I don't actually have to pin everything down ahead of time, because I can just fold this under and then keep it in place with my thumb, and I can keep sewing. So for these felled seams, we're working a whip stitch. So we're going to go down and catch just 1 or 2 threads and then up again in the seam allowance. And if you look closely, you can barely see the stitching that I've done. The last thing we're doing is hemming the lower edges, so the end of the sleeves and the bottom line. Again, I've anchored the fabric down to my clothes, because that way I don't have to pin anything. I can just fold the hem, fold it again, keep hold of it with my thumb and keep working. And the stitch is exactly the same kind of whip stitch as we did when we felled the seams. So I have the nice finished hem of the sleeve, and yeah, that's it. As you can see, I've felled and hemmed the sleeve separately, and I've done the bodice separately, and then I can attach the sleeves. I find it easier to do it this way, but attaching the sleeve is basically the same method as we've done before. This is my bodice. You can see the top of the gore up to here, the shoulder seam here. I'm going to attach the sleeve into this. You'll notice that the sleeve doesn't go all the way to the gore, which means that the space between where the sleeve ends and the gore ends, you're going to have to do another seam to stitch it together so you don't have a hole in the sides. This is what it looks like. Very flattering shape. What we need now is the neckline. So I'm going to show you how I cut that one. So here's my center front. I'm going to measure it 11.5 centimeters from the edge, including seam allowance. The front is going to be 12.5 centimeters deep from the seam. And I cut this as straight lines, but I'm going to round off the corner. Then I'm actually going to cut down to here and just pull a thread to get a straight line all the way to the other side. And once I get to the next corner, I'm just going to use the piece I cut from the other end to get the same curve. And now we have the neckline for the front cut out. I'm going to do exactly the same for the back, except I'm not going to go as deep. So for the back, I'm only cutting out 4 centimeters. Behold, neckline. It looks awful at this point. Now what we're going to do is hem this neckline, just like we did the lower edges. This will be the casing to hold the drawstring. The strings need somewhere to come out. There are tiny lacing holes here where the string can come out, so we're going to start making those. The lacing holes are going to be in the middle of the front, so I'm going to fold this thing double, mark where the center is. Editing Mia here, yes, I was a complete dumbass and put the lacing holes in the bag, so I had to go back and redo it. To know where I'm going to place the holes, I'm going to pretend like I'm hemming it, so I'm folding it once, folding it twice, and then you have an option of, do you want to put the holes on the inside so you can't see the string afterwards, or do you want them on the outside? I want them on the outside. So I'm going to mark 2 little dots, like so, and we're going to work with those. The easiest ways to make holes is with an awl. If you don't have an awl, try a knitting needle or a very thick needle. You're going to anchor the thread on the inside by tying it off and then work from the outside. When I do lacing holes, I start with doing 4 stitches to open it up a bit. And after that, I work in the round and I simply go down into the hole and then up again. And I keep doing that until I'm all the way around. And that is 1 lacing hole done. And now we have 2 lacing holes. They're not very even, but they'll do. What I'm going to do next is just double fold the edge all the way around and hem it, just like we did the other hems. Hey! Söt nose. Once you get to the rounded corner, you may notice it's a bit difficult to hem, so it usually helps to sort of stretch. It usually helps to sort of stretch the fabric out a little bit, then doing a slightly narrower hem just in that section. It still needs to be big enough for the thread to go through, but you can make it a bit narrower. Once you finish stitching the neckline, we are going to insert the string. I personally like using a very narrow cotton tape, but you can use any piece of string. And I'm using a blunt big needle. I'm going to hem these edges just so they don't fray, and then I'm going to tie a knot so that they don't slip into the casing. Here's the finished piece at last with all the seams pressed, and it doesn't look very flattering until you tighten the drawstring. Here are the insides, extremely neat and tidy. Gotta love the felt seams. And this is what it looks like finished. So this is a shift that's supposed to go under your stays or corset, whatever you're wearing, but it's also a nice garment as a nightgown or as the tunic, especially if you put like a belt or a skirt or something on top of it, like so. It's a very versatile, easy to make garment. I have so many shifts I use on a daily basis. So the tutorial series I just made of how to make a shift like this one can be applied to make other kinds of garments as well. So I just want to quickly show you some of the things I've made that's used a similar system. This one is extremely similar, but I've added a piece of lace instead of a drawstring, and then I've added a drawstring at the sleeves so they become puffed. And this one is very similar, but it's slightly tighter in the body, and then it doesn't have a drawstring, so it's always flat, which is also why it's more narrow, because otherwise it would just be too wide. This is yet another one where I've added insert lace. This dress is also slightly tighter in the bust, but it has this like heart-shaped neckline. It also has more gores in the sides. So I have 2 bigger gores, but then I also have 2 smaller gores, so that the whole thing is more flared and the whole dress is also longer. My Viking dresses are also extremely long. It's a full-length bodice, and I've actually cut this bodice as a triangle so that it's wider at the bottom than it is at the top. And the sleeves are also slanted, so they're more narrow at the wrist. But other than that, you see it's the same thing. You have the gores, you have the gussets, it's straight lines, all of it. Isn't it wonderful, the things you can do? Gotta love historical, practical, easy to make garments. But yeah, this is it. This is a long series. It wasn't supposed to be this long, but thanks for sticking with me. And good luck if you decide to try this yourself.